everyone, I'm Devin Totherow and I'm a senior at Meredith College. I'm majoring in history with my 6-9 teaching licensure.
Hi, I'm Kate Polaski. I'm a sophomore at Meredith. I'm majoring in history with my 9-12 teaching licensure.
And today we're here to present our research study, Fostering Online Classroom Communities through RTTP and Slack, that we conducted during the summer of 2020 with the help of our faculty mentor, Dr. Amy O'Keefe from the Meredith History Department.
So the key principle behind our study is the idea that relationships, whether they be acquaintanceships or friendships within the classroom, are key to fostering an effective learning community and bridging the gap between the social and academic aspects of learning. The original question behind our research was structured around RTTP, reacting to the past historical role-playing games, which put students into the context of historical events and have them engage in intellectual debates with their peers in the footsteps of historical figures. Now, in the spring of 2020, a large change occurred and many people in education found themselves shifting from face-to-face learning to online learning. And so we edited the question of our study to be about whether RTTP games were still functional in building classroom communities in this new online format, and if these were good tools for teachers to use to promote the formation of student relationships within this new format.
Essentially, the rising popularity of immersive and engaging historical role-playing games such as RTTP or Reacting to the Past led researchers Webb and Ingar to study how RTTP games affected the classroom community in 2016. Their research study was done in a lower division spring semester honors class at a large public university in the United States. Their study was conducted in a face-to-face setting, and their main research question was, did relationship network ties increase during the RTTP games played in this class? They looked specifically at both friendship and acquaintanceship ties. The main purpose of our study was to replicate the 2016 study in an online setting. Our study wanted to determine if RTTP did help build friendship and/or acquaintanceship networks between students, and if network formation in online settings works differently from face-to-face settings. Our study also aimed to provide instructors with information on what barriers are present or what barriers students perceived to network formation and building an effective classroom community in an online setting.
The methodology of our study consisted of 3 surveys which we wrote and sent out to the class in question at the beginning of their class session before any role-playing games had occurred, in the middle, and at the end when all the role-playing games were done. Our surveys were based around Webb and Engar's key questions, and we expanded upon them to detail online learning experiences and how the students perceived those. We also asked them questions about the methods of communication that they found the most useful and the frequency of their communication with their peers.
We collected both qualitative and quantitative data in the form of those surveys that Kate mentioned, observations in the online class, and a separate survey sent to spring semester students to document their experience with the shift from face-to-face learning to online learning. From this data, we created network visualizations that showed significant growth in student relationships over the summer term RTTP class. The classroom observations gave us the context for the survey results and the increase in relationship ties throughout the course. And Kate is going to talk a little bit more about how we used our Slack data.
Yes, so here we have our qualitative data. So in our questions about methods of communication, we found that as the surveys progressed, students increasingly cited Slack as the most useful communication tool over emails and texting. They also reported communicating more frequently with their peers as time went on, as they became more familiar with their peers and also the Slack platform. As we can see here in the first survey, the majority of students report not communicating with neither friends nor acquaintances outside of class, and those who do are either communicating with them less than once a week or once to twice. And then in the second survey, once the games have been going on for a while, we see that almost half of students say that they're communicating with their friends from class at least once a week, and 3/4 of students report communication with their acquaintances outside of class. This would indicate that they are discussing things with their teams or groups from the RTTP games, discussing strategies, or potentially discussing the events occurring in class. And then in the third survey, we can see that at the end, students reported Almost all students reported communication with their acquaintances from outside of class, and close to 3/4 of students communicated with their friends. We see green in the pie charts for the first time, which indicates communication 3 to 4 times a week. So we can see that as students became more familiar with each other and more familiar with the Slack platform, they were enticed to communicate further, and this indicates a stronger classroom community. We also surveyed the students about what they perceived to be the downsides or hindrances of online learning. Multiple students in the spring semester classes which we surveyed mentioned the lack of a private space to communicate with their peers as a hindrance to community building, referring to the fact that all of their communication was overseen by a professor within Zoom sessions. They also cited the loss of casual conversation that usually takes place before and after classes while packing or unpacking. One quote stood out to me in particular that I would like to read. Quote, "It was easier to create new ties with classmates in person because of the conversations before and after class. We wouldn't discuss anything related to the class, but the seemingly aimless chit-chat was vital to us seeing each other outside of the setting of our reacting characters. This was hard to emulate in the Zoom calls, where everyone came online for the class right when it started and left right after." End quote. We found it interesting that these concerns were less present among the students who had been using Slack, because the teacher that we were working with created different platforms within Slack, some of which she was not allowed to supervise or allowed to read the communication within. These were private channels for students to communicate with, and which seems to be effective.
Now I'll go over the quantitative data from our study. So this is the first network visualization that we created based on the results of the first survey sent out to the summer term class. Each green dot or node represents a student who completed the survey. If that student indicated another student as an acquaintance, then they have a blue arrow connecting them. If that student indicated another student as a friend, then they have a red arrow connecting them. The arrows point in the direction of who considered the other student an acquaintance or a friend. If the relationship tie was mutual, then the line will have 2 arrowheads, one on each end. In this initial survey, many students indicated that they considered no one an acquaintance or friend yet, which is why many of the nodes are isolated. However, if we look at the next network visualization that was created from the second survey results, we start to see an increase in the number of acquaintanceship ties and even the loss of one friendship tie. We also begin to see mutual relationship ties and even an unequal relationship tie where one student considered another student a friend, but this feeling was not reciprocated. Yet there are also still a good number of isolated students at this point in the semester. Finally, the last network visualization we created came from the third survey results from the end of the summer term. We see a significant increase in the number of relationship ties here. Many students have at least 2 relationship ties, and the number of friendships has increased. Only one student who responded to the final survey still considered themselves to be completely isolated from their classmates.
So, what conclusions can we draw from this data? So we can see that during the duration of the class and the duration of the role-playing game, both the number and strength of relationships between students increased. However, we cannot conclusively state that this is due to the reacting to the past game. Dr. Glotzer, a math professor at Meredith who we consulted with, is still working on the statistical analysis of our data. However, we can see from our qualitative data that the students said that they found the role-playing games helpful and perceived them to increase their classroom community. They also cited the use of Slack as useful in creating new relationships with their peers.
Because of our small sample size from the summer, myself and Dr. O'Keefe decided to continue this research study this semester in order to gather additional data to support our tentative conclusions. This time we are taking data from Meredith College classes and have 14 classes participating in the study. The methodology we're using this semester is almost identical to the methodology we used over the summer. The only change in the surveys is that we are now asking a racial and ethnic background question to see if that affects relationship ties. We are continuing with classroom observations as well, and we are excited about this semester's results and can't wait to see what conclusions we'll come to. Thank you for viewing our presentation, and here's our contact info if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.